we can compete against these bigger companies and these, people that have more resources than we have because we outwork them. And that starts at the top. It starts from the president of a company all the way to the new technician that just started.
I always fear the problem that doesn't get resolved that people learn to live with and accept.
A lot of it boiled down to is that we were operating at capacity because we had really inefficient processes and systems, and we had people that, although they were good people, they weren't great people for the job.
The biggest cause of frustration is unmet expectations, and the biggest cause of unmet expectations is either uncommunicated expectations or unrealistic expectations. Good morning and welcome to Coffee Break with Jake. I'm so glad that you're here today. For those of you that may be new to the call, we host this call every Friday at 11 a.m. And the purpose of the call is to learn from folks much smarter than me, learn industry best practices, talk about challenges, talk about opportunities. Today, I'm especially excited to be joined by Taylor Sears. Taylor is a very good friend of mine, and he is the COO of Silent Guard in Kentucky and Davis HVAC experts. Taylor, welcome to the call. Would you, for those of you that don't know you, would you introduce yourself and tell us where you're calling in from?
Yeah. Thanks, Jake. Thanks for having me. Hopefully, I'll correct you. I'm definitely not smarter than Jake. So I don't think I think we're all on somewhat of a similar playing field, but appreciate you having me. And hopefully there's some good stuff today that I can share that we've learned. And so we're in Kentucky. We've got an office in Somerset, Kentucky, and also an office in Lexington, Kentucky on our Silent Guard security side. And then we also have, like Jake mentioned, an HVAC division of our business too that's located in Somerset. So Somerset is our main office. We're in a very rural part of Kentucky. I actually live or sleep every night in Lexington. And we work as a business, our customers, really three primary states, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, but Kentucky being our focus. So that's where we spend most of our time. And I'm sitting in Somerset in our main office right now. And I think actually I've seen some names pop on here. I invited some of the folks from our team to see if anybody wanted to listen in so they can hold me accountable and they can tell you if I'm fibbing or correct me too.
All right. Well, I see Will on the call, and Dwight, guys. If there's any fibs, make sure to call Taylor out in the comments. But I don't anticipate any of that. So Taylor, tell us before we get started, and your specific role and your experience working in the family business. Tell us about kind of the history of Silent Guard.
Yep.
When did Silent Guard start? Where did How did you guys get started?
Yeah. So Silent Guard started in 1994. We were a division of our local electric utility cooperative. So South Kentucky RECC was the utility provider, and they launched a division of the business. There's more to the story in some of the products and things they were offering. But in 1994, they started doing alarm systems. And fast forward a few years, my dad and I think one or two other guys were part of that division, and he was running that. And they decided to get out of the business. So there was really only one other company in this area that was doing it, one that kind of had a monopoly on the market around here for a long time. And in 2000, I think it was, my parents bought out that division from the electric co-op. So they were 31 years old, younger than I am now, and I got somebody to lend them the money and got some people to help them and bought the business. So that was, 25 years ago at this point, and they moved Silent Guard when they bought it. It relocated from the electric co-op facility into the back in a tiny little room in the back of my grandparents' heating and air building. So my mom had spent a lot of time working in that business and was still working in that business at the time. My dad had worked there. His background was in heating and air before he got into the security stuff. And it just started to take off from there. So fast forward to today, long story short, we're now back in the heating and air business. My grandparents have retired and my parents have bought that company. So we say as two divisions. So our heating and air business division and then also the low voltage, not even really security. I mean, we do security, but that's just one small part. I tell people we're more of a property management and property awareness company now than we are like just security systems. So, yeah, it's changed a lot in the last 25 years since they've owned it, but 30 years, 31 years since the business started. And I know you said my title is COO, but I always kind of joke that my mom just makes up the titles, when she's in charge of HR and all that kind of stuff. So, what I get to do is a lot of things. So, we have an awesome team of people. I know we'll talk more about that here in a few minutes, but I get to kind of have my hand in every piece from sales and marketing all the way through finance when it comes to the products we do on low voltage and on the HVAC side. So every day is very unique, and you never know what you're getting into.
What was your first experience working in the family business? And did you know from the start that you were going to go into the family business?
I didn't actually start working here until 2019. So I'll share a little bit about my background. Um, did some stuff totally unique to the alarm, not in the alarm industry, very different. Couldn't be more opposite, actually. So I played baseball in college and spent most of my summers. I know there's a lot of people on here that are probably warehouse rats and pulled wires, growing up and spent a lot of time being out in the field and working. I didn't have that opportunity. I guess I had the opportunity, but I chose to play baseball instead. Knew that that was going to be my ticket to getting college paid for, and so I spent my time doing that and playing other sports. So got the opportunity to play baseball in college. Got a degree in business administration, and long story short, had a really unique opportunity through a professor that had really just taken me under her wing. And her dad was a coach for the Cincinnati Bengals. So I had a minor in sports business and was always kind of interested in that world and had no idea what I wanted to do for a career. So she got me connected to the right people. I think that's one of the most important things is it's all about who you know or whose phone number you have. You don't even have to know them if you just have a way to get a hold of them. So she connected me to them, and my first job out of college was working for the Bengals as an equipment manager. So very unique opportunity where I've done more laundry than probably everybody on this phone call combined. But got
I
some
bet
plus.
you know how to get the grass stains out, huh?
Yeah, I Fells Naphtha, that's the trick. There's a bar called Fells Naphtha, pretty much get anything out of football jerseys or whatever. But so did that and did a lot that goes along with it. But the thing that I really took from it was being around people that operate, whether it's the coaches or the players or the management, maybe not the Bengals management so much. I'm a Bengals fan and get a little frustrated with them. But in terms of the way an NFL player, I mean, they are at the peak and the top of their trade, right? They're the best in the world at what they do. And just getting to be around that and see the standard that they operate at was an incredible opportunity. I got to learn a lot from that experience. And I know Marvin last week, he talked about his time at Disney, and I think that's probably more fun than some of the laundry and some of the stuff I got to do. But it was a very cool experience that I'm forever grateful for. And my plan, I don't have a master's degree, don't have any interest probably in ever getting a master's degree, but that was my plan at the time, and I think God had a different plan for that. So I was working through with several universities that I got connected with through the Bengals, and was hoping to be a grad assistant, get my MBA paid for, and then go work for one of the manufacturing companies like Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, that type of thing. And didn't happen because I got a phone call one day while I was in the locker room from this guy that had got elected to be our governor of the state of Kentucky, and I had met him in a previous life when I was working in a restaurant that we owned, waiting tables and washing dishes, and made some sort of impression on him. And he asked me to come work for him. So I was 23 years old, moved to Frankfort, which is the capital of Kentucky, and got to spend time. Everything that he did, I was right there with him. So I joked that he had a chief of staff who was like the top of the totem pole in terms of importance, and then I was the chief of stuff, and I was way down at the bottom of the list in terms of my importance, but I was the only person that traveled with the governor. I was in every single meeting, and similar to what I got to see working for the Bengals and how these NFL quarterbacks, how they operate at such a high level of preparation and a demand of excellence. I got to see that in a different world from politics, the political side. And, I've sat at the table with the president of the United States. I've sat across the table from Justin Trudeau when he was the prime minister of Canada. I've gotten to do the most unique things that most people don't get to do in their lifetime. And then had an opportunity after that to go into a role that was with our economic development cabinet. So kind of a quasi, it's still public, but more private, right, than any other department of government, the Commerce Department. And I got to sit across the table from executives of, some of the literally the largest corporations in the world and negotiate tax incentives at 24 years old. And it was just such a cool opportunity. And honestly, all that stuff was awesome and fun, but I just got bored and wanted a new challenge. And I really don't know why. I called my mom and dad in 2019 and said, I'm going to come back and work in the family business. But I did and had no idea what I was going to do or what they needed or what they wanted. And we started working together in 2019. And that was my first introduction into working in the family business. And, it's been fun ever since then.
I meet a lot of next generation leaders in the alarm industry, and I've seen like a very consistent trend, that folks that have gone and done something else before coming into the family business, I feel like, not to say, because there's some great folks that just went immediately into the family business, took off running, did great. But I do find that a lot of the folks that do really, really well coming into the family business had previous experience doing something else beforehand. How do you think, how do you think if there was one thing from your experiences prior to coming into Silent Guard, was there one thing specifically that helped you in your role at Silent Guard? Something that you learned either working with the Bengals or with the governor?
It's hard to say just one thing, but I will say the self-confidence that I learned, being able to, when I came into our family business, I know there's some people on this phone call that I'm really close friends with that we've had the same conversation. When you come in and you have no experience in the business that you're coming into, you have to outwork other people. You have to prove yourself. You have to earn the respect. And I know there's some folks on this call. I don't know who all's on here from our office, but there's some people that have worked here a lot longer than I have that kind of grew up, where they were aunts and uncles to me. And now getting to work together is a unique thing, especially once we got to the point where I was the one kind of making decisions and in charge to some degree on how we do whatever we do. That's a unique challenge. But if it hadn't been for all those times sitting across the table from the head financial person of Toyota, negotiating a tax incentive deal and the things that I didn't get into the specifics of what the governor asked of me, but the responsibility I was given that gave me a level of confidence that prepared me. And I heard something, I think I actually shared this to you in a text the other day. I'd never heard it said the way it was said, but there's a politician, and I won't even say who she is, but I disagree with 99.99999% of things that she stands for and that she says. But I heard her say the other day in an interview that the more time you get to spend around people that are in these elite high level positions, the more you realize that there's really nothing that special about them. And I think that kind of summed up like what I got to see and do. And I think that's on one hand, that's like super makes you optimistic because you can accomplish anything. None of us are limited by what we can do because of who we are and the way we're wired if we can outwork and out hustle. But the flip side of that is it's also humbling if you remember that there's nothing that makes the person at the top more special than the person at the bottom of the totem pole. And we're all created equally, right? We just have different responsibilities. But I think that's something unique in our business that like there is no one person that's any more important than anybody else. We all have a job to do, but they all don't function without one another. And getting to spend time around some of the people I spent time around definitely think they're better than other folks, but it's just not the case. So I think that was a cool experience. And when I came into the business, when my parents they didn't have a specific role for me, and I think somebody said this in the chat that it should be a requirement for next gen members to work outside the business. I 100% agree because there weren't bad habits that I had from spending time around the guys, and I didn't accept anything for the way that it was. And it wasn't that I was any smarter or less intelligent than anybody that worked here. I was just 100% ignorant. Yeah, getting to, bring on new ideas and new ways of doing things that weren't totally my ideas, and maybe we can talk about that in a minute of how that happened. I think that was super important and, very valuable.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that I take from that. Number one, confidence, but confidence and humility, right? It's like, hey, I'm confident that I can do this. I'm confident that, I have the experience. I'm confident that I've done big things and that I can do big things, but also the humility of recognizing like, hey, I'm a person, I'm dealing with other people. We're all more or less created equal. And I think that that's so important. I take away from what you're talking about there, this idea that coming in fresh without I kind of look at it as accepting the way that things are done because that's how they've been done, right? Like if you work in a company, even within my own company, just a quick anecdote, I always fear the problem that doesn't get resolved that people learn to live with and accept, right?
Yeah.
And the most simple example of that is in one of my offices, there was a exhaust fan in one of the bathrooms that didn't work. And you're like, okay, that doesn't seem like a big deal. Well, that fan didn't work for a couple of years.
Mhm.
And at some point, somebody said something about it. Maybe I heard it, maybe I didn't hear it. I forgot it. And they lived with this fan. And my ops manager flies out there. He's visiting with them. They're like, hey, this fan's been broken. I said, get somebody out. Let's fix the fan. I got a message from the branch from a couple of folks. Hey, thanks so much for getting the fan fixed. And, but I think to myself, like, you can go so long accepting that the fart fan in the bathroom doesn't work that you're just willing to accept that. And I think that's such an important, being able to come in with a fresh perspective, because there's so many things that aren't an exhaust fan in a bathroom that can still make life for your team unpleasant, can make life for your customers unpleasant. So I think that's really great. All right. So you come into this role. How has the business grown since those early days, and how have you grown kinda within that role? And I know that's a huge question to ask.
Well, so start with where we were. We had 17 people and did whatever the dollar amount was in revenue at the time in 2019. And I felt like, and my dad's on here, he can shake his head if he agrees or disagrees, but I always felt like my parents had a job and not necessarily a business. I felt like they had something where they were working in it, and that's something I wanted to move away from. I wanted them to have the ability to own a business and be able to go pick up my daughter, in Richmond if that's what they wanna do today, that's what they need to do versus having to sit down and have to put quotes together and approve invoices and, all the stuff that goes along with that. So, that was kinda my goal from the start. How we got to that point, I didn't really know what that was gonna look like. So, what I did was, sit down with everybody that worked in our company at the time and really tried to understand, "What do you do?" And I would ask thousands of questions of why do you do it that way on everything, right? But I had to understand what we did because I was ignorant. I mean, totally ignorant. I knew we put in alarm systems, but that's about the gist of it, right? So I found all these things and like, oh, what are headaches and where are their pain points, and then we compiled this list and started to try to decipher like what's the root cause of this problem, and what a lot of it boiled down to is that we were operating at capacity because we had really inefficient processes and systems, and we had people that, although they were good people, they weren't great people for the job they were doing. And we went around the country and learned from different vendors, from friends in the industry. There's a sermon in church that I heard recently, and I think this is something that gets shared a lot of places. But the sermon was about who's your Paul, who's your Timothy, and who's your Barnabas. And what it's referencing is, who's your Paul is in who's somebody that's mentoring you, who is your Timothy in terms of who are you mentoring, who's a mentee to you, and then your Barnabas is who are people that are encouragers to you and help you to be successful. Thankfully, because my parents have been doing for this for so long, I was able to find, Paul's and Barnabas's, and I had no wisdom or, insight to share with any of the Timothys at that point. So I took advantage of those relationships, and we didn't do anything that we invented ourselves. We just went out and found what works for other people, and then also used things that I learned from like all the time I got to spend in Toyota, in their manufacturing plant, just learning as they're doing an expansion to build the new, EV cars and whatever they're doing. Their largest manufacturing plant in the world is in Kentucky. And I got to learn about how they implement the idea of Kaizen. And like every single day, we're going to get better at something. And, I kind of keyed on these experiences and um, also not just physically how we do stuff, but how I wanted to lead and how I wanted to do things. And I know this is a little bit back to your previous question, but something I learned, I think of an experience when I was working for the Beagles. I don't know if any of you all are football fans, but at the time, Andy Dalton and AJ McCarron were the quarterbacks for the Bengals, and both guys that I really liked and looked up to. And I worked primarily with the quarterbacks, and one of my roles was that I had to have a script during practice of the plays, where the ball was going on the hash, right? I had to know the down and distance, relay that in the huddle, and I had to be in the huddle to listen to the snap count, right? So sometimes they do, ready, set, hut. Sometimes it's green 18, set, go. There's all kinds of these different snap counts. Well, I had to know it. So the 2 different experiences with those 2 guys. When Andy was the one, he would pull me aside and be like, "Hey, Taylor, this is what we're doing. I wanna make sure you understand how this works," and he was helping me to be successful. AJ McCarron's philosophy was that if your job is to do something, you need to know how to do it. It's not my job to teach you. And I remember one time AJ had a snap count that I just wasn't familiar with. So in the NFL, those guys, everything operates off timing, right? So when he gives the snap count, I didn't snap the ball to him. The receivers take off going, and AJ didn't have the ball. So I snap it in a hurry. He slams it down in my face, "What the F are you doing?" Belittles me in front of everybody, which was embarrassing in the moment, but I appreciated it after the fact of like, he expects excellence out of me, right? And it's not his job to teach me. And I thought, I want to be kind of both of those things. We still want to expect excellence, but we also have to be intentional about giving people the resources to be successful. And that's to bring it back to the process and stuff. I think we were expecting our team to be excellent. We just didn't have the processes or intentionality to teach them how to do it. So we set out to implement those. We wanted to increase our capacity. We really wanted to decrease the stress level across the company. And we've read all the books. We've read Good to Great and Traction and Atomic Habits and on and on and on. You could rattle off all these books, but I don't think there's a one size fits all for every business. I think we've taken pieces of a lot of that stuff. And fast forward to today, we've 3.5 times revenue, in the last 5 years. We've got 42 people now, where we had 17 back then. And we're at a really good spot now where I think revenue can continue to grow, but not at the same rate we have to employ people because we have really good processes and systems in place.
Yeah, so I'm taking away from that, I'm hearing, expectations, and with expectations, accountability, but also creating a culture where, from the top down, you're communicating to your team, "Hey, this is how we're gonna do the winning," and forgive me, I'm not a sports ball guy, so I'm stretching here. But hey, if we wanna win this game, right, we've gotta know the play, the process for how we're gonna do it. We need to know it well. And from a leadership perspective, making sure that everybody on your team knows, hey, this is the snap count, right? Like this is how we're going to do things, and checking in so that you don't have those moments, because I'll tell you, this is one of my leadership pet peeves, and honestly something I even struggled with early on. Um, Having an expectation from somebody, getting upset when they don't meet that expectation, and not recognizing that, hey, they weren't aware of that expectation. They didn't know how to meet that expectation. So I really like that you took away from that, a need to meet expectations, but also having personally experienced being humiliated, right, in front of a team. You recognize, hey, look, like we could do this better. We can hold people to a high standard,
Yeah.
but we can set those standards. All right. What are some of the biggest milestones along the way here? And it doesn't have to be anything like totally crazy, but like for you, what were some of the biggest milestones or aha moments for you? As you've uh, been there with Silent Guard.
Yeah, I think every day, I mean, we don't, I do believe you should set goals. I think you should have goals that you're trying to reach and some of those things. I don't know that every goal, especially financial metrics and some of that stuff needs to be shared amongst the team. I think you can make decisions and kind of shape the direction of the business without having to tell people, hey, we're trying to sell this much stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so in terms of milestones, I mean, I think, um, the purpose of our business and, um, I think also, I've thought before, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. I've thought before about like how could we monetize what we've been able to do that my mom and how my mom and dad and even my grandparents how they ran their business. Like, could we write a book about this? And what would be the topics, right? What would be our good to great kind of thing we're going to talk about? And I don't think we have a recipe that is like easily duplicatable in terms of we just give you the ingredients and say this is how you do it. I think we just have really, really good people, and the purpose of why we're in business is not to meet financial metrics at all. We have to make money. We have to be able to pay the bills, but I think in terms of milestones, I love every time we get to hire a new person because our business is growing. That's another family that we get to support. When somebody has a kid that's stressful, we've had uh, 3 employees in the last 6 months or so that have had kids. I have a new daughter.
Gosh, I'm not gonna drink the water up there. I don't
Uh,
know what's going on.
I have a new daughter that's due, in a few weeks. And I think, when we can know that our employees are having kids and growing families and buying new vehicles and building houses, all the different things, I think those things are more important than the milestones we have in our business. So that's what gets me excited when we pull in the mornings and we see 40 vehicles in our parking lot, of employees and know that this place is paying the bills to support. That's a big burden to carry too. But the other side of that is it's really, really awesome. So,
Yeah. Well,
that's I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, but that's what drives us. It's not to, which I think is why we're successful. I think that maybe is the recipe is like, there's a culture here, not just talking about me and my family, my parents or wife, but with our whole business, if we have a whole lot of people that really care about each other, and it's pretty neat.
well, I look at that and I look at a business that's grown so tremendously in the, just really the past few years. You guys have, grown so much. I think that focusing on those individual milestones for your folks is such an important piece of it because sometimes we get so focused on big picture. Hey, we want to hit these revenue goals. Hey, we want to reach this, this growth target. But when you start to break it down for, hey, as we grow as a company, we get to hire additional folks. As we pay out more and more in commissions, that sales rep gets to buy maybe put a down payment on a house, right? Maybe they have the confidence to, to have another child, all these things that are milestone moments for them. And when you look at all these milestone moments and all of your folks growing as individuals and as families, like that the big picture of that when you zoom out is growth, right? It is success, but it has to happen on a micro level in order for that to, to really
Yeah.
expand out. I think that's so cool.
Well, I
So
think, and that's why I think if you're as a business, we want to keep growing, but not because we just want more and more and more. I think if you're either growing or you're dying, one of those two things are happening. And going back to what I said about getting my mom and dad out of a job, I think if you have a job in a business where you have to be in the weeds and involved in every decision, I think you're doing an injustice to the people that work with you because you have to be able to have time to work on the business, implement new things, try new things. And if that's not happening, the only way to continue to do more and more is by selling and installing more and more and more. So I think there has to be, somebody has to be steering the ship in terms of what's the direction of what's that look like. And back to what we were talking about earlier, that's I've really made a push. Some of it just because of the way the world's worked. Some of it is our intentional, but we've shifted. We started as a company that put in a device in people's houses that remotely measured the electric meter. That's how we started. A product called a meter minder, and that shifted into putting alarm systems in houses. And we quoted a system this morning that was $186,000, and, it has, like, 4 door sensors and a couple, and an alarm panel and, like, few motions. Like, the alarm is such a small piece in a business, right?
Sure.
It's a massive job, and, like, it's changed a lot, but that doesn't just happen by happenstance. Somebody has to be handling it, and the cool thing, I think I saw Matt on the call. So Matt started with us, a few years ago, and I don't remember exactly what year it was. I can't remember off the top of my head, but, we interviewed Matt to be a technician in the field, and we told him he had to be on a ladder, and he had to get in attics, and he's like, "Yeah, not for me." So we called him back.
Me neither, Matt. Me
Yeah.
neither.
We called him back a week or so later and said, "What if you can do all of the things that we talked about, but you do it sitting at a computer in our office?" And Matt's like, "Yeah, I'll start tomorrow." So he did, and he's been awesome. And now we have multiple people now in our office that do that same job. But what I think is even cooler is because of the growth and because of the stuff that we've got to implement and change over the last few years, Matt is like the guy now whenever we're looking to bring on new products or new softwares, and we've got to train our technicians, and we've got to learn how a new product works, and we've got to figure out how to demo it to a customer, everything that goes into that. Matt's the one that is tells me what we're doing. And, being able to see the growth that like he's had, and I'm just picking him out because he's on here, is pretty awesome. And we have a lot of people in our business that have done that, but it goes back to, no role is more important than the other, because if he can't do what he's doing now, it does no good for me to say, "Hey, we're gonna start pushing this way and doing more fire alarms," or whatever it is.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is attributing growth in the business to growth in your people, right? Personal growth, and also making sure that, hey, this person that may not be the right person in this seat is the best person to be in this seat, right? And so, as we're trying to grow, making sure we've got the right folks in the right place and helping them grow in their role. That's awesome. So, growth is great, but growth doesn't come without challenges. So talk to me about, what challenges have shaped your business the most and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think COVID is something we all experienced that forced us to, we talked about a lot of those processes and systems and things that we were looking to upgrade and, modify and improve, and COVID forced us to do all that stuff. And, I'm not thankful for COVID. I mean, it impacted the world in a lot of terrible ways, but if we're strictly just looking at what it did for our company, for Silent Guard, it's pretty amazing the impact it had on us in terms of it forced our hand of we have to be better, we have to be more efficient, we have to communicate better, we have to have better systems. It's put redundancies in places that we didn't have before, and it's made us be, successful. Marvin said this last week that I have thought about all week. Of you have customers that you just want to get rid of sometimes, and you have situations like COVID, for example, that you wish you could get rid of, but you either give up and curl up and give up on it, or you learn from it and it makes you better. And I've thought about that since he said that last week, and I think that's the opportunities and things that it presented itself because of COVID and those challenges. Another thing was, I don't know if anybody on here has used Interlogics, but we were an Interlogics dealer from 1994, GE Security, ITI, Interlogics, whatever the brands, Carrier, whatever brands they were, from 1994 until 2019. And we used them exclusively for access control, for video surveillance, and for um, access control, video surveillance, and security. And when they gave us a phone call, my dad and I were on the call when the head of Carrier said, "Hey, we're eliminating the Interlogix brand." There's like 7 of us on the call, and that was a shell shock because that's the only product we use. It's like being a Ford dealer and all of a sudden Ford's no longer making trucks. That was a major, or vans or cars or whatever, major thing to overcome, and it was a challenge, and it forced us to get better. And what it allowed us to do is we rediscovered, we had always tried to take this round peg of an Interlogix part and put it in a square hole of the solution we were trying to solve. And it allowed us to now kind of open our eyes and have a wider point of view of, hey, there's better stuff out there. But what it also did, and part of our kind of initial changes and things that I made is, we were just looking for work, and we would be all things to all people. And we made the decision that we're going to get really good at what we do, and we're only gonna do that, but we're gonna be the best at it. So we made the decision to eliminate a lot of the things like AV, for example. We don't touch AV. We don't touch central vacuum. We're not doing I could go on and on and on of all these other things. And it allowed us to be much better at what we wanted to do and what we know is profitable and we know we're good at already versus, people getting a bad taste in their mouth from us because we were trying to do other things. So those were huge headaches, when we were having to run service or we were trying to design a quote on somebody's central vac system. They don't sound like big challenges, but when you're doing this stuff every so often, it's a huge waste of time in terms of holding us back from being able to do other things. So when we got rid of that challenge, we were able to improve in some other ways. I think about that we have some competitors that try to dabble in AV, and we get phone calls and they are fed up with XYZ company because they had such a bad experience on their Control 4 from this alarm company. And I've thought about like McDonald's and their ice cream machine. McDonald's is a restaurant that's tried to get into, the ice cream world with their McFlurries and whatever else. People get a bad taste in dog McDonald's because the ice cream machine's broken, right?
Sure.
You don't but if you go to Cold Stone, their focus is ice cream. If you want ice cream, you're gonna go somewhere where they do it right, and it's gonna be a good experience. Or around here, we eat Raiders, that's our favorite. Uh, but, like, we don't wanna be all things to all people. We don't wanna have those experiences for people where they want something from us, and it's a bad experience like the ice cream at McDonald's because we're just not good at it.
I will say though, my last experience with you at Cold Stone started with sushi and chicken, buffalo wings and whiskey, and then ended in Cold Stone and
Specifically, a bourbon.
bourbon. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'll tell you, there's another reason to stay focused. Because if you lose focus and you do too much,
yeah,
even a good thing can go wrong. But
yeah, and that
no,
stomach hurts.
I think that's such you talked about Interlogic shutting down and just kinda getting punched, right, with that news, and I think that is such an important once in a while, if you don't get punched, you're not looking up, you're not looking around, you lose situational awareness, and so, what you talk about Interlogic shutting down, but then you talk about, "Hey, like, we really looked at what we were offering, the products that we were offering, the services that we were offering, and we honed it in and we defined it and we made, you know, um, educated decisions on where we go from here."
Yeah.
And I think that's just, that is that is the best response to getting punched, right? Because again, as we talked about earlier, you could get punched and you could just curl up in a ball and that's it, right? Um, Talking about making changes, like narrowing your focus, being really, really good at what you do. What's something that y'all have tried that has really moved the needle in your business?
Fire is something that was something we used to do. That was one of those things when we were talking about it back, a few years ago on these, we kind of listed out. These are all the things that Silent Guard does. What do we want to keep? What do we not want to do? And we made the decision that whatever it is we're going to do, we're going to commit to being really good at it. And um, we made some changes in the way that we do, not only fire systems just in general, but fire alarm monitoring, inspection, the inspection piece specifically. And we implemented some new processes. I don't want to get into too much on the specifics of how that worked, but we have seen a major increase in that department, in growth because we've gotten really, really good at it and we've just committed to it. So, that's something that I've seen, really cool over the last few years, especially. I think there's a big opportunity in fire. That's why you see a lot of these companies that are, there's companies every day. I'm sure there's people on this call that have sold, because they're a fire or are looking to sell because there's a huge opportunity. We're not looking to sell. I mean, that's not something we're interested in doing, but, our goal every day when we come to work is how do we make it more valuable when we leave? And, so that's kind of part of what my job on a daily basis is, what can we do? And I saw an opportunity within that, not to increase the value in terms of a multiple and sales and all that, but it adds value to what we're doing because now we can add value to the customer, right? Value doesn't have to be a monetary number. How can we add value to that customer?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting and an important pivot in the conversation, right? because 2 minutes ago we were talking about getting more focused and focusing on the things that make sense and the things that we could be really good at. And then, we move on to talking about, hey, and then we started doing fire, right? And I think it's important that, for the folks in the call that are looking at, hey, what do we want to do? You don't have to put blinders on and only do one thing. You just have to decide the things that make sense to do that are going to move the needle in your business. If AV is one in particular that, having grown up in a family alarm business to where they got somewhat heavily into AV at one point, the problem with it is they were complex projects, they weren't repeatable solutions. Even if everything was done right, there would always be things that would come up. But but then, when you talk about security, video, access control, fire, um, not every project is the same. But as you found, I'm sure, you can really figure out a process for making it a repeatable, successful,
Yeah.
profitable sale and installation, and not a service nightmare after the fact. And so, um, with that fire, add-on, do you think that eliminating some of the other, we'll call it nonsense, did eliminating some of that other nonsense help you to allocate resources and focus towards what is a profitable,
Yeah.
part of your
Yeah,
business?
one of the things we started with when we were looking to nix product lines and services was like, where do we spend the most time on the phone with tech support and what takes the longest to quote?
Mm.
And those were the things that were like, that's such a waste of time. Like, why not do things that, we know because we become the experts on. If people are going to trust us to be the expert on, we need to be the expert. We don't need to be on the phone with tech support calling people that are just using Chat GPT to look up answer, right? We can do that just the
Right.
same. So, yeah, it definitely has made a huge difference. And, going to like where we're at now, we used to, and I say used to, I'm just talking about from when I started. I don't know the details from before then, but we would typically have 30 to 40 jobs kind of in our backlog of work, in terms of projects we're working on. And, some of those may have been a central vac and AV and some of those things. And, now that we've decided what we want to really be good at and we've gotten really good at it, we were good at some of these things before, we've just gotten a lot better. I mean, literally yesterday afternoon, we had 143 jobs in our backlog of work. And, a lot of those 40 jobs in the past might have been 3 doors and a motion type things. Now it's 30 doors and 50 camera type things, right?
Right.
So, with that, there's growing pains that come along with that. But because gotten good at these types of projects, these larger commercial, especially, used to where we sold only Interlogix cameras, just using that as an example. Well, now I could probably tell you 5 different types of cameras that we use that we've become the experts on those brands, which has allowed us to get more projects because we have a better solution for what they need. And what we've found is from the sales process, so I think Will's on here. From the time that Will or whoever on our sales team gets in front of people, to the time that we do the install, to the time that Matt does the demo, to the time that we send a bill, the experience working with our team is better than any other company that we've ever came across. And we try to everybody thinks they're the best, but I know we're best. I'm very confident in that. But but we try in every aspect of our business to be the company that we would want to work with. We want what are the things that are annoyances, to us when we're working with contractors or whatever it is, and we try to do the opposite to make sure people love working with us. So what that's allowed us to do is we may only get to do the fire system, right, on this project, but they come to love working with Silent Guard. And they're like, "Hey, why don't you start doing this part of our business?" "Oh, we've got 6 more locations." We had a a customer, this happened just a few weeks ago. Um, they called us because somebody recommended us for an alarm system. A customer was happy and told them we could take care of them. They weren't happy with their current provider. And they called us about putting an alarm system in one building. It was like 4 or 5 doors and a couple motion detectors. Well, we did it, and they were so happy with the experience, and we learned through the process, they have 40 other locations. They also have fire alarms that need monitored and need inspected. And that, few doors and motion detectors turned into what's going to be one of our larger customers, in terms of what we're doing on a monthly basis. But it all starts with they have to have a good experience. The salesperson has to be knowledgeable and experts on the products we're selling. Matt has to be able to demo it. We have to have good relationships with our vendors to know that when we buy or we sell this product, I'm confident that Jake's going to get it to me on time at the price that we need, that we've agreed upon, so that we can do the install in the timeline that's expected. And that goes, across the board. And that's the challenge. When we hire people to start working with us, and when we bring on new vendors, what I tell people in interviews is, like, my challenge to you is you might be a lot smarter than me, but you won't outwork me. And if you can just make that your goal to work harder than I do, then we'll keep pushing each other and we'll go to new levels. And we have that conversation with vendors too. And we've had this conversation, right? We are not transactional at all. Like, we want to build relationships with our vendors, so that we know we can count on them because they know they can count on us too, right? To be a voice for them and give feedback when it's needed. And because of that, all of that leads to the customer gets such a better experience working with us because we know behind the scenes we're giving it everything we've got to make the experience as good as possible, from that first interaction with Will to the time that Crystal sends them a bill.
What I'm again, I want to go back to kind of where we were talking about some of these projects that y'all do not dabble in, including AV, right? And there could be some folks in the call that could misunderstand that to mean that you don't do it because those projects are complex. And I really don't believe that to be the case. I think that what I'm hearing here is you guys are able to solve complex problems through simple processes, right? So it's not that the problem that you all solve with your solutions is an easy one. I mean, we're talking about large access control, video, fire alarm systems, but because you have a really good streamlined process, the customer experience is better and you can do more of them, right? And you could do them repeatedly, you can do them profitably. And I think, for those of you that are on the call, they're looking at, hey, what should I focus on? Um, More important, and one of the things that I really like about Taylor is Taylor's so dialed in on process, right? And measuring what can be measured. If you really want to look at what you should be doing, start doing the math on what you're doing. Taylor talks about how much time do we spend on tech support? How long does it take us to quote this? Those are all aspects of, overhead costs, right? That time costs you money. So figure out ways that you could either systemize that or eliminate it or automate it. Um, Taylor,
That's something I want to point out,
sure.
something I've learned over the last few years because I mean, we've talked extensively over the phone about data and numbers, and I've always loved the movie Moneyball, and being a baseball guy, data and stats just kind of come with that, right? But so that was part of my goal, is like when I got to make decisions, I thought I'm gonna run this like Billy Bean does. We're gonna get super in the weeds and analytical, and we're not gonna replace somebody hitting, 400. We're gonna replace how many times we get on base. And we've been super dialed into what that looks like. But used to, I would focus and spend a ton of time on every number. And then I learned like what numbers matter and which ones don't. And it's made life a lot easier being able to hone in on certain things to know we can have a bigger impact across the board if we spend time improving this, right? And I think you can have paralysis by analysis just looking at numbers all the time. And that's something I've learned over the last few years and that's different for your business than it is for mine, compared to even another business on this call that do the exact same thing we do. What's important to us may not be to someone else and vice versa. So if you can figure out what those numbers that are important to you are, but you have to establish back to the vision and the clarity of what you're trying to accomplish, it helps you make decisions and what you spend your time looking at.
I heard this the other day that the biggest inefficiency is doing something really well that doesn't need to be done at all, right? And so like when you talk about looking at the right data, there are so many folks that I talk to that, you could spend all day in reports and you might only need to spend 10 minutes looking at something really important that's going to have a big impact on your business. I've talked about this on previous calls. I nearly ran myself out of business a few years ago because I wasn't looking at the important metrics, right? And now every day I get a dashboard that I look at that, make sure I know what I need to know to continue to operate the business. So, Taylor, on your day to day, talk to me about what are your daily habits or what are the daily things that you're looking at to make sure that things are running smoothly.
I think if you can prioritizing your time, figuring out what's your role, like what are you trying to do is where I think how I started with that. And, we have 2 separate divisions of our business that I kinda oversee in terms of heating and air and security, 2 totally different teams, and time management is something that I really struggle with. Where do you get the most bang for your buck? But then also, how do you be present? How do you be in the business? I think it's super important that although, I'm not as involved in, like, every little detail now, I still have to be in the loop and in the trenches, so to say. I think that's the way you earn respect from people, but is being in there, with it. But you also have to have time to work on it. So I spend 2 days a week, typically every Tuesday and Thursday. I work in our satellite office in Lexington. It's pretty quiet. There's not a whole lot of people in there usually most days. And I try to spend time during that, those days working on the business. So every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, when I'm in the office in Somerset with the teams, I have things that I've used Chat GPT to kind of dial in. Monday is for the purpose of getting updates and understanding what's going on, what does the week look like. Tuesday is for there's a purpose of every day, and I'd be happy to share that with anybody if you want to see it rather than going through. I know we don't have a lot of time, but having some structure and some goals to make sure that you're not spending a bunch of time on something that doesn't matter, but you're also being intentional about things that do make an impact. So that's my goal every day. Is to go into it with a plan, with a purpose, right? And I've got it all mapped out in notes and Chat GPT day by day of what I'm trying to accomplish on those days, and also based around what do you need to do when you're not around the team that you'd be wasting your time if you're sitting in the office with your door shut just doing when you could be present and be around people. So that's not a super great answer to your question, but I'd be happy to share that with anybody if anybody ever wanted to see it.
What I would recommend to you all is, I think actually, Taylor, what we're gonna need to do is I think we'd have a whole call on some of those daily things and reports on another call, because some of the stuff that I know you do on a daily basis is really sharp and important, in operating the
Let
business.
me share I'll share one example.
Sure.
This has had a major impact. We've had this conversation. I remember when I was first here and we'd sell a job that should take 16 hours, so 2 guys, 8 hours, right? And it would take too long, and my dad would be like, "Why this should have happened faster. We should have got it done faster. They need to work faster." That's kind of the old methodology, not just him, that's just an older methodology, and, what we kinda decided is, why don't we use the data to see how long stuff's actually taking, and why don't we start quoting for what it actually takes versus what we want it to take? And we sell things at the labor rates and the time it's actually going to take. And it's made us significantly more profitable because we approve every job before it gets sent to the customer, and we were able to have a major impact on our financials because now our time's actually getting paid for. That's like talk about one of the things. That's one of the things that we look at on a weekly and monthly basis is how much time did we sell the job for? What was the job type? Who was the salesman? And how much did it actually take? And we're constantly adjusting and manipulating those numbers to make sure that we are as accurate as possible. And you can find a lot of stuff in your business where it's a simple change and it can make a major impact.
I think that's so important. I talk about in business and in personal life, the biggest cause of frustration is unmet expectations. And the biggest cause of unmet expectations is either uncommunicated expectations or unrealistic expectations, right? And so what you describe there is consistently, number one, evaluating and measuring so that you can adjust your expectations, and then obviously communicating those expectations to your team so that, hey, we know how long this job should take. We know this job should take this long because the past 50 times we've done it, it's taken this long. And now when you're holding somebody accountable as well to those expectations, it's based on realistic expectations that are clearly communicated. All right. One quick If there's one thing looking back on your journey that you wish you would have known from the start, what is it? Other than that, you should buy from SS&Si, but
Yeah,
other
well, that's what I was going to say. But no, I think the work ethic. I mean, that's something I've kind of always had. I've mentioned playing sports and some of this stuff. Everybody, I think a lot of people feel like they have a unique gift. I really, to this day, don't know what mine is. I've not been able to quite figure out exactly what that is. But I do know, with baseball and some of these other things, I was always decent, but not the best. But I outworked people. And in our business, we're a good company, and I do think we're the best, but we outwork people and we out hustle, our competitors. And I think that's something that our whole team kind of has that attitude and that mindset. And then I wouldn't necessarily say it's something that I wish I would have done differently, but I think that's what makes us stand out is, we can compete against these bigger companies and these, people that have more resources than we have because we outwork them. And that starts at the top. It starts from the president of a company all the way to the new technician that just started that, is working part-time with you, just helping pull wires in the summer. I think if you have that attitude and that mindset, and I'm thankful that our team does. The other thing is, and this is probably even more important than that, is you have to have the right people. That's where everything starts with, and I'm super grateful that our entire team, we have 42 people on our staff, and I think we're at a place now where we finally have the right people in all the right seats. And now it's just how do we bring on more people? And that's where we've seen our business really take a huge leap. You talk of like it's not linear. We've seen this like major uptick in quality of service and growth in terms of revenue and some of the other stuff too. But just the quality of what we're doing has been directly correlated with new people that we've brought on. And whether we're the smartest, I don't know. I think we've got some pretty intelligent people, much smarter than me, but they know what their job is. They know what the expectation is, and they genuinely care, and are authentic. And customers pick up on that, and it makes it a joy to come to work. And I think one of the questions you had for me that we didn't talk about is like, what do you see in the future? I don't know. I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know what 5 years for our company holds, but I know we've got the right people that I think if any goal or expectation I might set, they're probably going to outpace. So we'll just wake up tomorrow and see what that looks like.
I love the Silent Guard story. I love, the family business. I've just consistently been amazed interacting with the folks on your team, how clear it is that everybody is so aligned, right? Just mission aligned. Oftentimes I meet folks that fall short of that, right? That they're not all going in the same direction for the same purpose. Taylor, I want to thank you so much for sharing your insights, not just today, but just so often, not only with me, but so many of our deal partners. I think you overdo the humility. You are a rock star, and I really want to just commend you on the success that you've had there with Silent Guard. Guys, I want to thank you all for joining the call today. We have this call every Friday at 11 a.m. You're always welcome here, whether you ask questions or you chime in or not. Through the end of the year, I'm looking to highlight really awesome leaders like Taylor Sears. And you're always welcome to join. Now, if you do business with us, I want to thank you for the opportunity to support your business. It really is an honor of mine to support so many businesses in the alarm industry, including Silent Guard. If you don't do business with us and you'd like to learn more, feel free to send me a message or reach out. I'd love to talk to you about that. But whether you do business with us or not, you're always welcome on Coffee Break with Jake. And again, Taylor, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate you, man.